Welcome to another Masterclass. This is today we're going to take a deep dive into HubSpot's CRM platform, and I have Kieran Cron, who's a principal growth strategist with HubSpot, joining me as my guest. So, firstly, welcome and thanks for joining me, Kieran.
Thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. I have to say that I'm really impressed with HubSpot positioning, the recent positioning, I guess, of as a CRM platform, moving away from specifically, the hub focus, which has always been fine, but it just seems like a natural evolution for HubSpot. So I wanted to have a chat with you quite specifically about that messaging, the crafted, not cobbled messaging. So to begin with, I wanted to just start with how HubSpot and I guess yourself actually see a CRM platform. What is a CRM platform? Because CRMs have been around for quite some time. It's not a new thing, but I'm interested in how you see CRMs have evolved and what they actually mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my perspective, the way that I view a CRM just in its basic form is a customer relationship management tool. But when we think about it from a platform perspective, it's really an all-encompassing system that allows businesses to have multiple teams working together in a unified manner. So if you imagine, a typical business that might have a marketing team, sales team, customer service team, they have operations, they might have finance, all these different departments in businesses that are typically kind of part of the same business operation are working in isolation. So they're not often working together, which creates issues from a customer perspective. It's not a really great customer experience if no one's on the same page and we don't have a single view of that customer. And then it can also create friction in the business, right? So potentially, marketing and sales teams not aligning well together. And I guess the idea behind having a CRM platform is having everyone from all those teams working together in one system, which often goes a long way to solving for those challenges that I mentioned before.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I guess one of the things I've taken out of that is the collaboration with the internal departments or functions. So customer relationship, it's more than customer. It's our whole of business kind of relationship management tool, or as such, because as we see silos breaking down, everyone needs to work together and work more collaboratively.
Exactly. And I think the key thing here is a focus on the customer, right? Making sure that the customer is the center of that whole experience. Almost the experience management is one way to look at it. And it should really empower the teams to do their best work and continue to deepen those relationships with customers by knowing everything they can about them, about their history, how they've interacted with the business, and having all that together is just going to create a really good customer experience.
Yeah, excellent. The second area I wanted to talk about was the crafted, not cobbled messaging. And I love the alliteration. I think it's a really clever, creative line. But I'm really interested in understanding what underpins this and what the key benefit of the users for the users actually is.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely not going to take credit for that one. I think there's some pretty smart people in our marketing team that have come up with that. So I'll definitely give them credit where credit's due. But I think in terms of the message has been resonating pretty well in the market. I think one of the reasons for that is because, to your point earlier, CRMs are not new. They've been in the market for quite some time now. And a lot of businesses have, either had a go at adopting them or they've looked at them previously. It's actually quite daunting, the fact that there's over 12,000 vendors, software vendors across CRM and marketing automation and all those different types of software that can help businesses to solve for potentially one or a number of those different elements that we spoke about before. Some do them really well, but not all of them really solve for the entire experience. So what we find, and when I speak to customers, it's either a built by you type situation where a business may have, cobbled together or acquired a bunch of different softwares. They might have something powering their CMS, something for their CRM, another thing taking care of their marketing automation. which is almost like this kind of Frankenstein system that they've like stitched together with middleware, which has its own problems. But then there's the other part, which might be called built by acquisition. So, other vendors in the marketplace that might have grown through buying and acquiring other companies and stitching those different solutions together to provide what they might call a CRM platform. And it does offer the suite of services and solutions that a business needs. One of the issues that we see there is the fact that that process of acquisition means that they are stitched and cobbled together. They're not really a true unified system, so you can integrate them together. And annoyingly, for a business to want to buy a suite from another vendor, they probably need to pay for those things to be integrated, even though the customer would expect them to be, an all-in-one platform. So that's something to keep in mind is, as people in the business, once the system is integrated, need to move between the different parts of that system. The user experience is not really going to be consistent. They're going to be unfamiliar. If a marketing person needs to move into the sales side or sales needs to move into customer success, there's that inconsistency. And so having siloed tools, in terms of my first example, Built by You, makes it really hard to align because reporting isn't consistent. It takes a lot of time to pull those things together. Things break, information doesn't pass between systems accurately all the time. And then in terms of the acquisition side of things, like older legacy systems can often have a clunky UX, so it makes it harder to adopt from a people perspective. But I guess like the key behind, HubSpot is from a unified single code base and everything kind of built from the ground up, a consistent user experience across the whole platform. Things don't need to be integrated together, and having that single source of truth makes it much easier for your teams to align. Also, having that one intuitive UX makes it easier to adopt, and adoption is one of the most common problems that we see for businesses that try to implement CRM solutions. And then, I mentioned before that unified code base makes it easier to adapt. So you can customize, and it has the flexibility to make changes a lot faster because you don't always necessarily need development capabilities or resources. Having someone in-house, that works in marketing that's able to modify things quickly and having that agility is really quite important for businesses.
Yeah, definitely. We live in an agile world, and having a CRM that can kind of work with you on that front is critical. Thanks for that. The next question was really, I read a report from Gartner Research that said 81% of companies are now competing mostly on the basis of customer experience. And we know that customer experience is not owned by any one department. It's a whole of business kind of approach. So I'm interested to know how HubSpot navigates the silos that are often in customers, marketing, sales, service, operations, and how you sell what is an integrated CRM platform in terms of how it can help with customer experience.
Yeah, so I touched on that earlier, just in terms of the common problems that businesses have in terms of these different departments being siloed, and that also siloing their customers. It's never a great experience when, as a customer, you need to repeat yourself multiple times to the same business. From a consumer perspective, we're dealing with one brand, which means that we expect that brand to know us in detail if we've given them information or have had previous interactions or transactions. I think that that expectation is growing and is very much ever present. So the consumer expectation is probably higher than ever. And that's not a great thing for consumers, particularly if you're working with a business that has, it's not uncommon for a business to have multiple divisions or different entities. I was speaking to a finance company a couple of weeks ago, and they have about 6 or 7 different lines of service. And I can only imagine how frustrating it would be for one of their clients to kind of gets passed around between different departments, and the marketing and messaging that's coming out to them is not relevant because they just can't connect the dots in terms of how there's a relationship between those different departments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think we've all had that experience, particularly when maybe it's the large telcos where you get passed around to different departments and having to restart that process of conversation every time. Very frustrating. I guess you mentioned before one of the biggest customer pain points is adoption. And we find this as well, that this is overwhelmed kind of feeling that the customer might have in terms of the behavioural change that's required, even in smaller customers. It's not just limited to larger customers. How does HubSpot overcome that kind of objection or that kind of feeling that the customer has, or it's a pain point, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think a lot of it has to do with the change management piece. Making sure that there is buy-in and a willingness to change from the top down in an organization, regardless of how big or small they may be. It definitely needs to come from a place of us doing this together as a team and everyone working together towards the same common goals. So having that as the kind of central tenet behind the reason to make a change means that everyone's aligned, right? And I think from an adoption piece, people are often overwhelmed by change, right? Change can be scary to some people. Some people may really adopt it and may embrace it. And so I think when you can help the business to understand what the future state looks like in terms of the gains in efficiency they might get by having an easier to use system, also thinking about the better quality of conversation they may be able to have with their customer, the insights, for example, that a salesperson can draw from marketing campaigns, and really kind of thinking about what does 12, 24, 36 months ahead in the future look like. And generally speaking, it's going to be a much better place both for them and the customers. So helping them to understand and articulate and kind of paint that vision of the future is probably going to go a long way to helping them make sure they don't feel like it's an overwhelming thing to go through, because the change is going to be positive. And it might just be also by starting in pilot groups as well with smaller teams for bigger businesses. It might also be by having a champion, maybe a person within that department that's really open to technology and embraces change. They can become like a power user or someone that really understands the system quite well, and they can advocate that change. And that helps a lot to have someone that kind of leads by taking that first step forward.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like often, we will sell the vision quite well, and then project management comes on, and you get stuck on projects and problems. And I think it's really important actually to keep reminding people on the vision. Like never forget why we went down this path. Just to show them what the future, remind them what the future looks like and what it could unfold and provide. I think that's just another tip that I'd add. Finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit further about the cobbled system. So you've encountered, let's say, a customer who has a cobbled system. What do you say to them? Let's say they're interested. Do they throw it out? Keep applying band-aids? How does HubSpot kind of navigate that situation?
Well, from my perspective, I think a lot of it comes down to, is the solution or the system fit for purpose? Like there's a lot of businesses that do have cobbled systems that might work well for them. So it's not to say that there's a one size fits all and everyone needs to throw it away, because it's not the truth. Smaller businesses that might have less employees and a smaller number of solutions in their tech stack, they might be able to manage it and it might work fine. So it's not a case of saying, throw it all out. It might have taken a good amount of time and resource to get to where it's at, and it may actually be working to a decent degree. So I wouldn't say that everyone needs to think about changing their systems. Really, like it comes down to, I guess, how much of a problem is that creating for both the business and the customer? If there's a lot of pain there and there's a lot of challenges that are creating a poor customer experience, it's leading to negative reviews or customers that are leaving and churning the business, that's probably a good reason to start to look at making a change. So I think you need to understand the impact and the consequences that Collab system may be having on the business, and then make a decision from that point onwards. You could potentially look at one part of the system. You know what I mean? There could be multiple parts to that. So you need to diagnose which part of that is creating the most friction, and then you can potentially start with solving that before taking or tackling the whole issue from end to end.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. That's typically how we would look at it. I guess the beauty of HubSpot is that it is modular. You can grow with it. It can grow with you. But I think the most important part is if there's no vision of how the future could look, then it's easy just to keep propagating the same old cobbled system and not really solving the pain points that are in the business, or even kind of anticipating what those pain points will be in a few years' time, because things change really quickly. And if you've got problems now with your systems, they're only going to kind of get bigger as time moves forward, I would have thought. Definitely. That's all I have for you today, Kieran. So I don't know if there's anything further you'd like to add about the CRM platform and the approach that HubSpot's taking. But yeah, certainly I thank you for your time and your insights have enlightened me, and hopefully our small but growing audience as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, David. It's been great to chat again.